Spectrovision Radio. Spectrovision Radio.
Hello and welcome to the Modern Fairy Sightings podcast, where we listen to people's fairy encounters. But take heed, we're not talking about winged Tinkerbells here. These are real fairies, real encounters that took people like you and I by surprise. Stay a while and hear their stories. My name is Jo Hickey Hall, and I'm a folklore researcher.
And what I learned was a lot of the things I experience now through magical engagement were kind of turned up to like 1,000. So an insight I might have trying to engage with a spirit that's like a small nudge became like HD visual booming quality sound communicating something I felt throughout my whole body, which when I was 18 would have fried my brain, and it did. But in this experience, I was completely open to it and ready to go there and see what would happen.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Modern Fairy Sightings podcast. My name's Jo Hickey Hall, and with me this time I have Trad Andro from Radical Elphame podcast, which is an excellent podcast. If people are a fan of Modern Fairy Sightings, you will love. I mean, I think it's a perfect companion, really, because you really get into some excellent chats and really kind of get underneath some of the things that arise in the kind of interviews that I have on this podcast. So welcome.
Yeah, honored to be here. I've been a listener of your show for a long time and proud Patreon member. So yeah, huge inspiration for why I started doing my show, for sure.
Oh, thank you. Well, you're a very valued member, and it's great to see that you now have your Discord too. And you also have
Yeah,
a Substack.
I do. Yeah, I started about a year ago, and that's been a fun avenue to kind of process the conversations I've had on the show in many ways. Sometimes I'll ask questions of guests and they'll respond with kind of like, I don't know, I've never thought of that. And so to me, that's always a good clue that, oh, that's something I should try to understand more. And so it's been a lot of that. Yeah, exploring all sorts of magical and philosophical topics, but also a pretty strong focus on looking into kind of fairy phenomena and that sort of thing.
Yeah. So what brought you to this point then? You know, did you have experiences in the past? What kind of brought you into that sphere?
Yeah, oh man. Um, yeah, I'd say in the TLDR would be that when I was about 18, I had kind of what I call an involuntary initiatory experience while on psilocybin that at the time I would have called a very bad trip. And originally, I had no means to process it in any sort of way to engage with what I was experiencing or glean anything meaningful from it. I just kind of felt traumatized at the end of the day. And after, I don't know, probably around 9 or 10 years afterwards, and kind of being able to just move on with my life and sort of ignore the things I experienced, I was really pulled to look really closely at what we would call like Fortean phenomena. So, broadly paranormal topics, but a very, very compulsive fascination with fairy type phenomena specifically. And that wasn't something that made a lot of sense based on my general interests or life prior to that. Like, I was not into fantasy as a young person. Like, I'm only passingly interested in Tolkien, you know what I mean? Like, I don't even have most of the prerequisites to be into fairies. I actually don't really have. So the fact that I had such a strong a strong compulsion to look deeper and deeper is something I decided to just lean into rather than move on from, and it's something I haven't really stopped. And that led me eventually to witchcraft, specifically a form of witchcraft they usually call like traditional witchcraft, which dovetails very strongly with engaging with what we would, I think, call fairy phenomena, at least from one angle. And that is kind of where I come to things now. It's engaging with fairies in some form on like um, a very involved fashion, you know, as opposed to just a thing I experience per se. It's a thing I actually actively engage with. In my opinion, I can communicate with it, engage with it magically, that sort of thing. So yeah, kind of a long circuitous journey that was not really what I ever intended to be interested or involved in. And now I'm very much fully engaged in a way I never would have expected if you would have told me I'd have this podcast or be writing these essays on Substack like 10 years ago. I wouldn't have believed it. Yeah.
Thank you. So, did the experience you had, the psilocybin experience, did that kind of introduce you to that world in some way? I mean, you can, you know, you don't have to describe what happened, obviously, because it's a very personal experience. But would you say that it somehow opened the door into, communicating with beings in that way?
Yeah, it was very much I guess as time went on, eventually when I started reading old like witch trial records where they would describe their experiences, which often you could translate as being on like a spiritual level, or even sometimes like a dream level, but clearly like still real in some form, but maybe not happening right before their eyes. I would say that reading through all of these transcripts and hearing all these people describing these very strange experiences with spirits, for lack of a better word, that they often interpreted as fairies, really, really resonated with what I experienced on psilocybin, having never engaged with any of that subject matter at the time. Um, there was like shape shifting into animal form. There was this very strong feminine presence that was kind of leaning into the trial aspect of what I was going through in a way that was kind of tricksterish. Overall, now I feel like it was a positive challenge, but at the time it was very difficult. There was a strong element of communications through stars, and a strong element of time being manipulated and adjusted. Um, all things that at the time, again, I just was like, well, this is just harrowing and stressful and kind of paradigm breaking, not even shifting, just like kind of destroying my materialist view of the world in a way that I can't process at the time, being pretty young. And now it just seems um, very much in line with this kind of spiritual liminality that we often see when we look into fairy phenomena. And I didn't try to engage with spirits after that for a very long time until I had a paradigm to view it through. And so it wasn't until getting that kind of guidance through the framework of witchcraft that I was able to then start learning how to even begin talking to any sort of spirit, be that something that we might call a fairy or something else. Um, but once I started trying to, I find it was very easy at that point to get to a place where you could have, you know, if it's not a conversation, it's like very clear insight and intuition and that sort of thing in a way that now I feel like I've said it on a couple other interviews I've had where at one point I would have to do a very ritualistic type build up to feel like I could start communicating with something. And now I could just be driving in my car and to a an onlooker I'd just be talking to myself. But to me it's very engaging and insightful, and I'll by the end of my chatting and intuiting feel like I've come to some sort of new realizations or learn something important that I'm supposed to be either just for myself or for that spirit, something that they would like me to do for them, or something that I should maybe be focusing on for the podcast or for the Substack or something. Yeah. 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 I would say I definitely have different forms of communication with different spirits that seem to like different things. And sometimes I have to wonder how much of that is based on my own like psychic limitations at times versus what they are wanting to do. I think sometimes it takes a while for a spirit to figure out a way to get my attention, perhaps, or to make sure I'm actually getting across what they're hoping, that sort of thing. But yeah, sometimes it's very, very somatic, to where it's almost entirely feeling based, which is both sensation, but then also the thoughts that arise from those sensations, which is like a very strange experience because it's like about as counter to human communication as possible, where, it's not some sort of word, some sort of image, some sort of display. It's purely sensorial, which is not something that happens all the time, but when it does, it can be really like affecting. Um, and I know other people who engage with what, for lack of a better phrase, I often just call like seership. Somebody else might say psychism, somebody else might say scrying, all these different terms. Um, Other people often can get actual visualizations, it seems like, more regularly, even in a casual setting. For me, it does tend to be what I call just like inner eye, for lack of a better word. Um, and I don't know why that is. That's just for me. And I know other people who have like no inner eye. So for them, it's almost all sensorial, or audible, or then you have, like that insight level, which is like you have an idea that wasn't your idea. It's not founded on something that you were able to pull from to then come up with the conclusion. You're like, don't even know what that is, but makes a lot of sense, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So all of those happen sort of to me at different levels. And yeah, certain beings, for lack of a better word, do like to do certain or different forms of communication. And then sometimes maybe the same one will switch it up because it's faster to have me just intuit something. It's faster for me to just know a thing than it is to have a back and forth or something like that. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, so there's kind of ones where, you need to figure it out. You get a sense of
Hmm.
something, maybe the strand of something. It's interesting about, so if it comes in inner eye, but it isn't an image, can you explain that a bit more? I'm interested about that.
Well, I should say, for me, it typically is an image.
Yeah.
And that's something I'm grateful for because I know a lot of people don't have that capability on a natural level.
Mm.
Um, so it is typically inner eye for me, but it'll be inner eye. And sometimes that means I'm literally, I think, seeing a being showing me things. And it's very much like I'm in another place interacting with something.
Mhm.
Often it's more like charades, where it's like, here's a picture of a gold thing. And you're like, oh, a gold thing. Oh, yeah. I'm thinking this has to do with the sun. And you're like, okay, so the sun. So it becomes this like very slow, drawn out process of piecing together a message. And the difference between those two communications is hard for me to say whether that is like I'm not tapped in enough, I'm not letting myself go as far as I could, and so it has to give me these little hints, or if it's just like that's what they're choosing to do at that moment. Like they don't want to come fully formed and just like show me a thing or tell me a thing. I wish I knew the answer to that, honestly. But yeah, I will sometimes. It'll be cool. You have a visual hint in your inner eye, followed by a feeling that informs it, followed by a thought or even a word. That I don't personally hear words audibly. Very rarely would I have an experience that's audible like that. But I will like hear a word in my mind. So it's almost like my inner voice, my inner monologue, but it's not my inner monologue. So that could be a way all of those things dovetail into like one form of communication coming through, but through all these avenues at once.
Mm. Yeah, I very much relate to what you're talking about, and yeah, all of it really. It makes me wonder about your childhood, and again, you don't have to go into this if you don't want to. I'm just curious whether, you had experiences as a child, and yeah, how that might relate.
Yeah, it's funny. I Part of me saying like how I felt very drawn to this later in life. My late 20s really is when I got pretty engaged with this stuff. So about 10 years ago now. Is that as a child I wasn't really naturally disposed to any of this. Often if you interview people into magic, they'll say, "Oh, when I was a kid, I lived in a haunted house," or whatever. I talked to spirits in the woods, all sorts of things like that, which I think is amazing. And I really didn't. I don't think I had any like real paranormal experiences as a young kid, but I was very interested in paranormal things. I found it fascinating, that manifested for me through like unsolved mysteries on TV, that kind of stuff. Like I was just found it interesting. I liked horror movies and spooky things, but in a purely fun, exciting, entertaining way. I think when I was really young, I found horror, even child versions of horror in terms of film and books, to be like so scary that I felt this desire to overcome that fear by looking harder at it. And there's a part of me that wonders if that has something to do with where I've ended up being very engaged with spirituality, where now it rarely has anything to do with fear at all. But I've always found it interesting how in modern culture, horror, for whatever reason, is one of the only genres we're allowed to engage with spirituality. So if that's the only thing you have available to you, that was the thing I got really attracted to, which is kind of interesting. And then it wasn't until high school where I was the person who got very interested in Ouija because I had a girlfriend who basically told me it worked, and she was not at all. She was a very no nonsense type person. And her saying that shocked me because I think we were like 17 or 16. And at that point, I never would have considered doing it because it didn't feel real. And when she told me she actually had some weird experiences, that got me excited. And so I would do it pretty periodically, usually in the setting of a party, like a very like non-spiritual environment, and had tons of very clear like paranormal experiences from doing this. And it was one of those things that I was very I was amazed by. I was like, how come we aren't all talking about how this is possible? And even I would do it with friends and they would see and hear things and we'd be kind of stunned. And the next day or Monday going back to school, I'd be like, wasn't that wild? And they'd be like, yeah, but it clearly didn't affect them and they didn't change their perspective on the world. That always like kind of stunned me. So that was a few years leading up to my psilocybin experience, which really like rocked me. And then I think after that, I probably would have continued to be interested and engaged if I wasn't so overwhelmed by the experience I ended up having on psilocybin that made me want to kind of shut it out for a while to get my bearings and just become a functional person. So I kind of just focused on like career and stuff like that for a long time.
Thank you. I'm really kind of struck by the theme of what sounds like initiation as well. In both cases, with the psilocybin experience, you've really, gone through something quite significant, very significant, sounds like, um, that took a long time to process, which just sounds like you did alone in some respects. And then but there's kind of coming out the other side of that, sort of moving into it, coming out the other side of it. And even as a child then as well, there's, being frightened by it, but kind of moving towards it and moving through it. So yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? How I think many of us do. We were sort of somehow. Well, I don't know. I'm going to ask you the question. Do you feel familiar with these worlds?
I mean, now I do. It's interesting. My friend Anthony Miller, who I've had on the podcast recently with his co-host Sinead Wheelahan, they have the Fire and the Cosmos podcast.
Yeah.
It's a really cool show. And he has this whole psilocybin protocol that he mixes with um what's it called? The gateway tape process tech, So it's like a weird kind of sci-fi engagement protocol he has. And my family was out of town, which is very rare because I have a 1-year-old and a 5-year-old and my wife. And usually if we go somewhere, it's all together, but they all went somewhere and I was by myself for like 3 days. And I was like, this is such a rare opportunity to do something where I have no responsibility. So I was like, I kind of want to try his protocol, which involves taking a very high dose of psilocybin. And this would be the highest dose I've ever done, higher than the experience I had when I was 18. And it seemed kind of like a challenge to myself now that I'm so engaged with a practice that has helped me process the experience I had. Now that I have an actual practice, and I've had now years of reading about and interviewing people, trying to understand what I think I experienced on like a realm level, I was like, I want to try this again and see what happens. And not even to go into necessarily what I experienced or saw, but what was really interesting was that despite being like a very surreal, powerful, intense experience, the whole time I was able to process it very comfortably and I was very open to everything that happened. And it was incredibly insightful. And what I learned was a lot of the things I experience now through magical engagement were kind of turned up to like 1,000. So an insight I might have trying to engage with a spirit that's like a small nudge became like HD visual booming quality sound communicating something I felt throughout my whole body, which when I was 18 would have fried my brain, and it did. But in this experience, I was completely open to it and ready to go there and see what would happen. And so the fact that having engaged with this more intentionally now for a long time is giving me positive experiences that I have the framework to engage with, grow from, work within. Whether or not I was already familiar with these worlds, it does show me that I can be, and that it can be a really positive experience, especially with the tools to work within them. I'm not necessarily somebody who would say like bad experiences only come from what we bring to it, because I think that can be like a spiritual bypassing thing. But in my instance, that is kind of what happened. I think what I experienced when I was 18 wasn't actually inherently bad. And if I would have had a framework to engage with it, I could have come out with it as like what a cool experience, like how interesting. But I wasn't able to, so all I could do was be scared by something I didn't understand. So yeah, I don't know that like when I experience what I would say something like a realm like fairy now, that it's something I have like a sense of from a different time or a time when I was younger, but it does feel like a more whole experience of reality. I think if you are a Western person like I am and was raised in a very materialist way, you kind of live a very left-brained life. You're kind of maybe you're even forced to, by society potentially. And I think opening up this other side, this whole other half of experience that is, on this more like psychic realm, for lack of a better word, it isn't so much like you're going to another dimension. It's more just like you're actually having a more whole experience of this one. Um, that's kind of how I now consider what it means to engage with that world. And when you're on an entheogen like psilocybin, I think it's just kind of amplifying things more to that right brain side of things and cutting off the left brain, which I don't think is a holistic way to exist, but is a useful way to reframe things and maybe go get some information to bring back to your like more balanced reality. Yeah.
Yeah, and it makes me think of a fugu.
Hmm.
In Cornwall, went into a fugu, and it's this So it's kind of like a tunnel into the ground, and it leads into a very, very
Mm,
dark chamber. So
hmm.
it cuts out
Like sensory deprivation.
sensory deprivation, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a bit like that, isn't it? If you're kind of
Hmm.
you are removing yourself from the world and just being in that space. So it's, I guess it's one alternative maybe, to psilocybin in that respect. But
Yeah.
yeah, it really, it you are going there for a reason, and you're going there to commune in some way. And again, it really feels like, what you had, what you went through at 18. It's like this kind of rite of passage, because in that you do get broken into pieces. I mean, for some people, it might just actually be through suffering. They might go
Hmm.
through some kind of personal situation which just, like, blows them away. And they have to put themselves back together. And in the kind of putting back together, you really know you've experienced something that you can't ever quite verbalize. But it makes you experience the world in a different way. It's not the same as kind of strictly communing with these worlds per se, but it's that part of you that how you knew the world to be before is, no longer the case. And it kind of opens you up, actually, because now if you are changed, that there's kind of room for maneuver. So when you enter into what you said you did recently, and I'm also kind of curious, obviously your family was going away, but did you get
Hmm.
a little nudge about doing this, do you think, from somewhere?
Honestly, I haven't thought about that. Um, Probably, yeah. I do have pretty active communication with a group of spirits about all sorts of things. And anytime I have extra time, my instinct is always, let's do a thing. You know what I mean? Having kids, especially young kids, I have less time than I wish to do fun magic stuff. Like prior to having kids, or even when I only had one kid, I could do a lot more. I could go out into the woods. I could spend the night more easily, um, even doing things in my house more readily than I would probably do now, or feel like is always the wisest thing to do now. And so, yeah, I think the fact that it is now a much rarer experience to engage in like proper ritual and be allowed to turn off the part of me that needs to make sure something is safe in the other room, wanted to wanted to take advantage of the rare opportunity to, like, okay, this is a rare opportunity, like we need to do something big here. Because yeah, the thought of doing, what they call like the heroic dose of psilocybin after the experience I had when I was 18 is not something I ever really was that attracted to, because even with what I've been able to experience more intellectually over time through active engagement, it still feels like something could shake loose potentially now. At least that was the fear I had, and I guess it was just going to the spirits that I trust pretty well and getting the sense from them that like the green light, like do it, and that made me not really afraid, because I was like, well, I I am very confident that whatever is going to happen, they will be there, and that most likely whatever I'm going to experience is going to involve them, because I get a sense that they are very close to me on some level. And that is exactly what happened. You know what I mean? There was not things from the outside really coming in. It was just um, a barrier being removed that really opened me up, which was cool. Yeah.
That sounds amazing. So in a sense, it feels like you had faith that they were kind of holding a space for you in some respects. Would you go that far and say that they
Yeah, definitely. I would for sure. Yeah. I would. And yeah, I would say, like, let's see, what am I trying to say about this? I would say that part of what my experience when I was younger, when I was 18, was like, was as though I downloaded too much information at one moment and I couldn't process it. And so it was scary because it was all very, what we think of as reality isn't quite what it is, which can be a fun thing to engage with if you are looking for that, but it can also be very um, disruptive and discombobulating. And so when I was 18, it was as though I absorbed a lot of information that I had zero interest in, that maybe I could have studied over, months or years all in one moment. And so it just like shook my body. It'd be like as though you could feel the experience of running a marathon, the aftermath of that at one moment, and be like, oh, and now I feel all of this pain and like this like exhaustion. And but that on like a brain level, it was like the mental feeling of going through that. And it lasted for like a year, which was like very intense. And working with spirits on a regular basis in a way that already is not something I would have thought was real back then just makes me very open to reality being so much more malleable, so that things don't shock me really at all, anymore. Like there's not a lot of insight I could receive suddenly that would break my brain. I'm just kind of like, yeah, that checks out. Like that's kind of sure. Maybe it's new information, or it's like, oh, that's a cool concept. But now when that happens, I'm mainly excited. It's mainly, um, it mainly feels like, aha, I've gotten to a new level of this game. How exciting. Like, what are we going to do with this new information? So that I think more has to do with just incorporating really authentic spiritual engagement into my life regularly. I think if you do it, that's kind of what life becomes, for me, anyways. Yeah.
It sounds really, as I said before, kind of freeing. It's very
Yeah.
freeing, and I think it's a good place to be at this sort of current juncture in the world where
Mm-hmm.
you know you're not kind of shocked by things,
Yeah.
because there is a lot happening and it's very fast moving. So you know, I think it's good that lots of people are kind of prepared in that way. It seems to be that people have been preparing in some way for something. So
Yeah.
that's quite interesting too. But and I also agree. I mean, having children myself and not often having a space where I know I'm not going to be disturbed. And as you say, it's not even a case of your children being in bed, because you can't fully
Mm-hmm.
give your practice your all when you're being a parent, with them
Mm-hmm.
in the home. And when you do get that time, it is really potent, and that's when the most powerful, I find, working in a group, is one thing that I can do, but when I'm at home and I just have that time, you really do, it's you really use that time, and it's like whatever you engage with has been sort of waiting for that appointment with you for some time,
Mm-hmm.
and it really happens. So I think, it's a blessing to have that, and to have your family, to have both. But I always really appreciate that.
Yeah. I just want to fully agree with that because I think when I first started getting involved in like magic or witchcraft, there was this sense of that more materialistic view was still a large part of my existence. So I would think every time I did a ritual, it was like, is something going to happen this time? And it would be more of this like ghost hunter mindset of like, oh, is this time a thing going to happen? Whereas now I've gone so much away from that and so fully engaged with what I consider like real spirit contact on a regular basis that, like you say, now if I have time to do a ritual, I'm not wondering if something's going to happen. I'm aware that, oh, spirits are very excited that I am going all the way right now. And almost always what I get is what when I first started would have seemed mind blowing. You know what I mean? As far as the experiences or the insights or the inner visualizations. Yeah, it's not a matter of catching one on tape. It's a matter of meeting them halfway and being fully engaged. And, yeah, I do find they're kind of like very excited to have the appointment.
That's great. So I'm thinking about, your practice in itself. You mentioned that you go out into the woods, and that's just such a privilege to be able to do that, isn't it? Just to kind of go out. Do you go by yourself? Or you working with somebody? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wish I could do more of that. I do find, I think being a woman, I don't feel
Mm,
safe to do
yeah.
that. Something that I miss, um, that we used to do in a group. But so that's obviously an important part of your practice. And do you just kind of go out there and see what happens, or are there certain kind of practices?
Yeah, yeah. I'd say I am very, very lucky to live where I do. It's a very strange place. We live in a little valley near Mount Shasta, and I can within a 15-minute walk or a 5-minute car ride be in the middle of the woods, where there's like bears and wolves and just like it's proper like the woods. Really cool, beautiful places. So on a mundane level, I am taking my dogs out there on hikes all the time, and I'm always kind of open to anything happening. So that would be more into that. Sometimes nothing, sometimes, oh, interesting. I'm experiencing something, I'm intuiting something, or you get kind of omen type things occurring with animals. So that is a more mundane type experience when it comes to being outdoors. I would say now that I have 2 kids and less free time, when I do something outdoors, I would put it more into like a pretty ritualistic framework, because it's part of that like making the appointment. So it's a special thing that I've planned for. I've gotten my wife to agree to take care of the kids, and I'm gonna go out there and do a thing. And usually it's not like I'm trying to do a magical working in quotes. It's more like I am just wanting to give like a big offering, be really fully engaged in like a more I don't know, pronounced way. Because what I've always found is that in nature, in quotes, nature, in the woods, in the forest, what have you, there seems to be more for spirits to bounce off of or something like that, as opposed to in a home or like here in my workplace where I do things fairly often. It's as though animals and plants and trees can amplify messages or currents of energy from spirits, something like that. So I do find it really powerful to be out there just for that reason alone. And yeah, I'd say my practice overall, though, a lot of that, besides being a thing I do periodically, almost like in the way like a Catholic would be like, oh, it's that holy day. That's my saint. So I'm going to go give them an offering on that day. That is largely what I do outside now. And now my practice more has become more of that seership type thing on a more regular basis. And also working with the writing I've been doing on the Substack has become like a very intentional way of trying to work with my closest spirits, not only to write things for other people, but to write things for myself, which maybe sounds strange, but it's almost like I will come up with a subject I want to write on, and I will more or less come to my spirits and say, like, so tell me more about this. And so slowly over a period of time, while writing and researching that topic, I feel kind of guided by them to the places I need to go to then like connect dots. And then when it's all done, I can go back and read it and go like, ah, like I had no clue that that was a framework for that subject matter, and now I understand it so much more. And that's not to sound egotistical because I don't really take a lot of credit for that, if that makes sense.
No, I think that's real learning. You're led. It seems to me that's the way that we naturally learn. We follow our nose, and you know, we have our intuitions. I mean, I found that also when I was writing the book, and I've spoken to
Mm-hmm.
other people who found the same. Sometimes I would go to bed for a nap in the day,
Mm-hmm.
because I was kind of, I knew it was almost like, right, this is the bit where I need to go for a nap because something's coming, but my brain can't actually access it at the moment. So I'd go to for a nap for 20 minutes, and I would get it as I awoke, or I'd go to bed one night and I'd wake up with the answer in the morning, or I'd,
Mm-hmm.
after a nap, I would just look at the book in huge piles of books. That's the book.
Mm-hmm.
Just not even question it. Pick it up. Yeah, of course. There it is. It's, I think that is the way that we naturally learn. We've just kind of got out of the practice of doing that. That's all. So, I love to hear that that's how things are. Yes, when you are learning and writing in that way, it's I guess it's a little bit akin to channeling in some way.
Mm-hmm.
It's then, when you're reading back, you're seeing it in its fullness, but it's not you that has directed it. And so
Mm-hmm.
you have, basically, it's come through you, you've written it out, and now you are, among other people, somebody that's going to enjoy this. So yeah, in fact, because I've only, with everything I've been doing lately, I read one or two of your pieces about a couple of months ago, I think it was,
Mm-hmm.
because I was just so overwhelmed with things at the time and all the reading I needed to do for my book. But
Oh
I
yeah.
was reading one or two of your pieces, and I really, really enjoyed them. You're gonna write a book? Because if you did, I would be very, very interested to read that. There were some really insightful ideas in there. Your writing in itself was just, yeah, it was just beautifully, beautifully written, and very Moorish. So yeah, are you thinking of doing that?
Yeah, I don't know. I think the only reason I wouldn't want to write a book or wouldn't pursue it would mainly be about time commitment. So it's really that limitation because I've really, like I just said, I would say a large part of my practice now, like, is writing with spirits actively involved. Like, to me, I get a lot more out of that experience and learn a lot more and experience a lot more than I would in a ritual in the woods. In some ways, I feel like a lot of that ritualistic engagement was a large part about me learning to accept the reality of these things. I mean, and keep following the clues to get to a place where now I feel confident enough to be like, oh, I'm going to focus on this essay with this one spirit in hopes that it teaches me whatever it wants to teach me. That's not something I could have pulled out of one single ritual in the past. It's much more deep and involved. And also, my work on it is a deeper offering than just like, here's some wine and some bread. You know what I mean? Like, that effort, I think they experience as like much more palpable because it is, even though I enjoy it, it's time and, exhaustion on my end. Um, but yeah, so yeah, I guess long story short, um, whether or not things take the shape of a book, I do want to keep writing, and I have really enjoyed Substack for a um it's a good template to house it, I find. And it's been really valuable connecting with other people. I don't have very much time to actually read as well. And I have, even though it sounds very, I don't know, it could sound dystopian, the feature on Substack where they have like an AI read the articles that's just built into it. Have you seen this?
No, no, I
It's
clearly haven't spent enough.
almost all of them have it unless people can turn it off,
Mm.
or make it to where you have to subscribe and pay to get it. But it's been a game changer for me because even though, it's not perfect, you can tell it's not a real person, but it's not like a robot voice. It's like an AI simulacrum of a person. And because I make wine for a living, I'm often bottling or I'm forklifting barrels or I'm cleaning out something, and I'm usually by myself. So I can listen to an audiobook in a day. You know what I mean? So it has been very fun to engage with other writers more actively now. I'll be like, oh, somebody has a new essay out, and I just listen to it. Because it's a different medium than podcasts, which I also love because I really love conversations, and for that exact reason, I can listen all the time while I work. But yeah, I that piece I'm guessing you were referring to is more or less a summation, um, I've done 4. I'm writing the 5th now, and then there'll be at least one more. It's like a summation of how all the varying hypotheses about what fairies are might not be mutually exclusive and maybe looked at as one large phenomena that encompasses all of them. We might actually tap in a little bit closer to what's really going on. And that's the kind of thing that potentially, if I'm able to find the time and the energy, I might try to someday piece together into something bigger, fill it out, add some more to it. But we'll see. At first, I want to get everything I'd planned already done and out there, and then I'll see if it's worth like adding to and adjusting and that sort of thing.
So it's starting as a series of essays, but
Hmm.
it's going down a certain road. So with the AI thing you mentioned, so it actually
Hmm.
reads it for you. So
Yeah.
not, I thought you meant that it kind of skim read an article.
No, 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 no. It's
Okay,
like an
right,
audiobook. Yeah.
like an audio book. Yeah, that is very handy, and it's part of Substack, is it?
Yeah, I didn't even know about it till a month or so ago when I started being more earnest about putting these out. So I was trying to read as much as I could to be involved in the social media aspect of engaging with other writers, which,
Sure.
as far as social media goes, is a pretty good one. You know what I mean? Um, and then I saw this play button and I was like, what's that? And I clicked it and I was like, holy shit, they're going to read me the whole thing. And so, yeah, listened to like an hour long reading of an essay I was wanting to read anyways.
Wow.
And I just had so little time to sit and read, that it was very valuable. So, yeah, AI is probably going to end the world, but I'm glad it can read essays to me currently.
It does have some value then. Yeah, no, that does sound good. I think I remember you talking about the way that when you have guests on your show and you know you have a topic that's kind of that's left as a what if or an
Mm.
unanswered question, do you find that that's when you will get a call from, is it yourself, or do you think it's, you know, whoever or whatever it is that you're working with at the time? Do you think, is it a bit of both?
Yeah, I think what happens, and I didn't fully understand this, and now I kind of think I have a better idea of it, is that when I read somebody's work, especially something I'm really interested in and really excited by, and I'm trying to come up with questions for interviews, especially earlier on, I would come up with these really, really complicated questions that I almost listen back to now and like cringe a bit because they're a little like I'm clearly coming up with my own thesis in the question that is not exactly what the person wrote about or like typically speaks on. And they're usually polite about it, but they often will go like, "Huh, I don't know, like never thought about that." And when that happened enough, it became clear to me that I don't need to interview people to get answers to those questions. I need to figure out them for myself. But for myself, to me, meaning that I need to work with spirits who can actually help me get at least closer to them. It's not like it's going to solve the problem of some of these vast mysteries of existence, but that maybe it'll, come up with some cool working hypotheses around them. And that's what I've since discovered is a lot of the things that would have become really complicated questions to guests that didn't necessarily pertain to exactly what they were writing on. I've now realized are a perfect avenue for a like essay topic for me to go into and to pose to either spirits or a spirit and say like bring it on, like let's have, like you kind of described, some bibliomancy. Let's have a podcast come out tomorrow that perfectly ties into this subject, that brings me down a rabbit hole, that makes me read a book that shows me the thing, and then when I tie it all together it's like, aha, now I see it. But it would not have occurred to me to sit down and just do that.
No.
Those connections would not have been drawn prior to making that decision to start writing on it.
But it's a bit like when you described before how when you get an idea for something, it doesn't just come as like a fully formed thing. It
Yeah.
it's not an answer, it's not that flash, it's not that definition.
Mhm.
And I wonder if there's kind of there's an enjoyment of that journey, because otherwise it's a bit like, well, it is just like that it could happen like that, but where's the fun?
Hmm. Yeah.
There's a sense of, being sort of set on an explorative journey, and that's actually really, that's living, isn't it, really?
Hmm. Yeah, I think essentially, at least my experience of what I've been writing is totally a mystery solving experience. You have this question, which for me is like, I want to write about this subject. I don't quite understand how this works. Like, how does this pertain? If the subject matter is, what does fairy have to do with UAP phenomena? There's a lot of connections that have been drawn and that can be drawn, but there's still tons of questions that haven't been answered. So if you focus on the things that don't make sense and that don't jive, and you throw that out there and go like, okay, let's engage with those fully and try to see how we can connect them and make them work. And then when you're done, you have, 10 pages that does that. You've kind of gone through this weird journey of trying to solve a mystery. And then, yeah, you're following clues. You're not just receiving the answers. You're following the clues. And then, if nothing else, combining them into an interesting thought experiment for somebody else to maybe pick up and add their own thought to.
Yeah, I really like that idea, which again is not that I've used it very much, but it's something that Substack kind of offers, because people can speak to each other in that way, or learn in that way, pass these ideas along. It's pretty cool. On the full-length version on Patreon, Chad discusses his organic winemaking business near Mount Shasta and describes how his spiritual and ritual practice feed into that for his clients. He shares the kinds of energies that arise in relation to the winery. Chad explains what it was like to discover Wicca growing up in the 90s, and how he instead chose a traditional witchcraft and animist route. Thank you very much, Chad. You've had some seriously shaking experiences. If people are wishing to kind of lean in to this way of being, what would you suggest that they kind of do to begin?
Well, I'd say that if anybody listens to this show regularly, didn't just kind of do a random YouTube search and was curious about a fairy sighting only, but is actually like a engaged listener to all the things you talk about, I think they probably are completely qualified to try to engage deeper into the realm, because I think they know the pitfalls that are possible and are conscientious enough not to fall into them too easily. That's what I would say. I know some people have a more negative view of fairies and humans engaging with them, but that's my take. And what I would say is, well, if you want to look at it the way I do, um, I would say I would look into animism, um, and I would look into, for me, I would look into the way a mythology that appeals to you, whatever it is, whatever your ancestry is, engages with animism and engages with whatever their old gods were, and see that as a template that you can aspire to. So for me, like we were talking about ancestry, I'm very inspired by like the Finian cycle of Irish mythology, because when you look at that, a lot of the characters are fairy or half fairy, and they constantly run into fairies and engage with fairies, sometimes mate with fairies, sometimes have children with fairies, sometimes are horrified by fairies. But that is kind of, to me, a little bit closer to what I experience when I engage with what I call fairy. It's more like you're engaging with what we would have considered old gods at a different time, that are very manifest within this world, just can flit between the tangible and intangible at will very easily, sometimes speak in dreams, sensations, insights, that sort of thing. So yeah, I would say engaging deeply with animism, engaging with any mythology that really appeals to you, and seeing how that animistic worldview is expressed within it. And then always just reciprocity. I think why animism is so valuable is it has at least anytime I've encountered it lately, it seems to always have this ethos of right relation, and to me that is kind of the Wiccan threefold law that's actually true. Instead of what you do will come back to you, it's just always pursuing balance and right relation, I think, is just always the way to do things. And even if that means doing malefic magic to stop somebody from hurting somebody, you're still pursuing right relation. You know what I mean? Like, right relation would be that person not hurting that person. So yeah, I think that's a good way to engage with it. I think some of the scarier aspects of fairies might be them pursuing right relation in ways that don't always fit within our human framework of what's good and bad. So
yeah, it's a very refreshing take on it, and I really, I really chime with that too. And also, looking back at the indigenous ways of being, they they come together in this, in that, we are not so far from these worlds at all, and that they are, alongside us, and that we can learn to be, as as the old sort of medieval Irish literature suggests, in tandem with each other, moving in and out of each other's worlds. And I'm not even sure if worlds is a good way to express it, but yeah, that in and out of each other's lives. So yeah, I agree. I think that's very good advice too. Well, thanks so much then, Chad. And yeah, I will speak to you again soon, and look forward to reading more of your Substack too, now that I'm kind
cool.
of around. And yeah, you're going to come on to speak to the group at some point too.
Yeah, sounds great.
So that would be really cool. And yeah, come and chat about anything that you fancy. But I will ask the group too. I know they're all fans of yours too. So yeah, excellent. And have a great rest of your day there, in the workshop. And thanks for making the time to come and have a chat.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much for listening and watching. If you enjoyed the podcast, please consider joining us on Patreon for dozens more episodes of unreleased bonus content, monthly online events, and a private chat. We are a warm, supportive community, and it really helps to support the project. Find us on patreon.com/The Modern Fairy Sightings Podcast.
Spectre Vision Radio.